Okay, so our next block is the little stocking, and it is applique, and you can decide if you want to use felt, white fabric, cuddle fabric, whatever up here, but this is basically just two colors, and this has stitching on it. So we are going to use the scanner to scan it, and I want you to notice that this block really sits sideways. In other words, when you bring your stocking in, it's going to be this way, so we're going to have to flip it, okay? So when I tell you to flip something, I just want you to know that your hoop is actually laying on its side. Okay, so if you're looking for things to scan, you can just go to Google, and what I do is I'll just type in coloring book image, Christmas stocking, coloring book image, bird, whatever. And there are a lot of free images that children can color for free, etc. And that's how I found this stocking. I'm not an artist, so I don't draw, but I just grabbed a stocking that was quite simple that we could just do some fun things with. So anyways, if you're on a Destiny or a Solaris, you have a scan tablet. If you are on an Altair or a Meridian, you're going to have to use your phone to take a picture and send it to your machine. Now, if you have the second Solaris upgrade or a Solaris 2, you can now also use your phone to send it. And I'm going to show you how to do that in a separate video. Right now, we're just going to use the scan tablet. So if you're on one of those other machines, you're going to scan it. We'll cover how to do it, and then everything else from that point on will be the same. So when you put your picture on your scan tablet, you never want to cover these two black and white stripes. These are the stripes that tell the machine how big your design is. It puts everything in perspective for the machine. When you use your magnets, if you only need 2 magnets, use 2. You don't have to use 6 to hold it down, and sometimes the magnets get in the way. You want to put the magnets either horizontal or vertical, and you're going to see that when we go to crop this. If you put your magnets like this, you're causing yourself a whole lot more work because it's harder to crop this out. So we're going to go ahead and you're going to put your magnets on here. We're going to go to IQ Designer, and you're going to place this on your bed just like it is a hoop. So I'm going to reach over, push it on, lock it in. If you have any thread in your machine, you want to unthread the machine because that thread dragging is going to cause just lines in your picture that you're going to have to erase. So I've got that on my scan tablet, and now we are going to come over to our machine, and I am going to go to the scan feature. So if you're on a Destiny, up here in the top right corner, you're going to see 2 flowers with an arrow, and that's your scan feature. If you're on a Solaris, you're going to use this arrow right here, the little fern, green fern in a white box with an arrow, and you touch that, and we are all going to do an image scan. So I'm going to touch this, and I'm going to say scan. And when you do that, it gives you a message that things are going to move. You want to make sure you're not up against a wall. You want to make sure you're not leaning over it so it hits it. And you're just going to touch OK. And your sewing machine is going to make several passes over this scan tablet. Now, if you're on one of the machines that have the camera, or you're using the app just takes a picture and sends it immediately, and it's fast. I know a lot of people that have gotten that think it's difficult. It's not difficult, it's just different, and it goes so much quicker, and your design is so much more crisp. And that's what we're looking for, is a crisp design. As soon as it gets finished scanning, we're actually done with the scanning portion, and everything else will be done on the screen. So it's making its last pass. And if you have your sewing machine sitting in a window, a lot of times the sunlight interferes. It's better if it's a little bit dark. You don't want the sun coming right on it because it kind of skews your picture. Okay, so when I'm finished, it brings my design up here. And what I want to do is I'm going to go back here and tell it that I want a line design. And if you're on a Destiny, it will show you the line design. Everyone, no matter which machine you're on, you need to come up with a picture that looks like this. It's going to show you your scan with the magnets and everything else. So what we want to do is we want to crop out all the parts that we don't need. So we don't need the magnets in here. So I'm going to use the arrows at the top, the upper left and lower right, and I'm just going to press and hold using my finger, my stylus, or my mouse, and I'm just going to pull this down to crop it out. Now, I don't want to cut off any part of my stocking, obviously, and I just want to crop it so that I'm getting rid of those magnets. So that's a pretty good cropped image. I can see it. My grayscale detection is okay. It's telling me, it's reminding me, you need to assign line properties, because if you don't, the default is a satin stitch, and we don't always want a satin stitch. So once I have it cropped, I'm going to touch OK. All right, and then it's saying, can you see it? And we're like, yeah, we can see it, so we're going to touch set. Now, no matter which machine you're on, it actually has two images here. It has the scanned image, and I know that because I can see the magnets, and it has the cropped image, which is this. Okay, if you are on a Destiny, down here you have a scale bar that shows lightness and darkness. And if you come over right about here, you're going to see a white arrow in a black box, and if you touch it, it will get rid of your background image. On the Solaris, if I touch the white leaf and the green box, it makes that image go away. So if you're on a Solaris, you're going to touch this key. If you're on a Destiny, you're going to touch it over here. And if you're on one of the other machines that uses the camera, we'll have a separate video for that. Okay, once everybody is at this point, we are now ready to digitize. So no matter what machine you're on, everything here is going to be the same. So after I have my scanned image, we want to clean this up. So to clean up your artwork, I'm going to zoom in and show you what I mean by cleaning up. So I'm going to zoom in and pan, and I'm looking for any breaks in my line. And right here, I have a little like loop that shouldn't be there. So I want to get rid of that. Here is a little extra line. All of these become stitches. So I'm going to grab my eraser, and I like to use the square, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to erase any of those. Now remember, when you're zoomed in, your eraser is really huge, okay? So here, this is going to be really hard to get rid of. So something like this, what I would probably do is make my eraser a little smaller, and I'm going to come here and erase just a part of this. Now, I need to put that line back. So to put your line back, you can go to your pencil. I'm going to go to line properties. This pencil, I'm just free drawing. I have a hard time doing that. This pencil closes the shape. This pencil makes a straight line. So if I go here and choose my straight line, I can try to go here and make a straight line up. And that looks pretty good. I could also make a straight line across here. Okay. Anytime, I'm going to zoom in more. Anytime I have extra, so see these little points here? Those make a really thick line. So I want to get rid of these when I can. So again, I'm going to go in, grab my eraser. I like to take my eraser and put it here. See how that's going to be way too big. So I'm going to make my eraser smaller. I'm checking to see how big it is. That's much better. And I'm just going, still not small enough. So it's a real tedious process, but you get great results. So if I come up here like this, I'm just going to take that one little pixel away. And I'm going to take this one little pixel away. And you can be as precise as you want, or, you know, it's your artwork. So some people like to take a lot of time and clean it up, and other people are saying, okay, it's good enough. But what I want to make sure is that I don't have a line break. Now, this is not a line break. This has a pixel here, so this is all one line. If I zoom out, you can see it looks like a stocking. So don't get hung up when you zoom in, because when you zoom in, there looks like a lot more lines than there should be. So I'm going to go back to 800%, and what I like to do is go over all of my lines and just see if I have any breaks or if I have anything that shouldn't be in here. Now on this particular one, we're not doing a fill, but if you were doing a fill on this, you would want to make sure that you have a closed shape or it's not going to fill properly. So right here, I have an extra line, so I'm going to touch my eraser and get rid of it. I'm going to make my eraser a little bigger because I have room to move in here. So again, I start my eraser here and just go up. Okay, and I'm going to come down here, and this one's going to be kind of hard to get into, so I'm going to make it smaller. And if I accidentally erase something, I can just draw it back in. And I like to erase and lift because I'll show you in a minute. Let's say I'm erasing here and then I slip, then I have to bring everything back. Where if you erase and erase, then when you bring it back, you're just bringing back the last thing you erased. But I'm still trying to get in here closer without getting my head in the picture. And I'm going to zoom in. I can get one little part right here. Oops, too much. Going to zoom in farther. So you can see when I zoom in, my eraser gets bigger. Too much, so I'm going to hit undo. And I'm just going to go back and touch this. Perfect. And so I just want to keep going through here to make sure that I don't have any extra lines that I don't want. Now, the advantage of using your camera on your phone and taking a picture and sending it, so if you're on the Solaris 2 and you have the upgrade, or if you're on the Altair or the Meridian, is you do get a much crisper picture and you have less cleaning up to do. Okay, and down here I still have another one. So you can see I get kind of crazy. I like to get all these extra lines out. Right here, I'm going to clean that up a little bit more. And I'm just going to take that line away and I'm going to draw another line in. And it didn't quite touch, so I'm going to do a little bit of an erase. But again, it's just, okay. So I erase that, and I'm going to put a line in. Just want you guys to see it's not perfect every time. It just takes a little bit of perfect. I'm good. I'm good with that. Let me erase one little segment here. Takes patience, and there's one little break in the line there, so I'm going to put one more. And it's funny when you start doing this, and if you've been in class, you know, if you have a break, it won't fill. So I don't need the fill, but I do want it to be, I'm just going to leave that. Okay. So let me, can you feel my frustration? Okay. I'm good. So we're just going to leave it like that. Okay, so this is called cleaning up your artwork. And once you have it cleaned up, you want to save it to memory because we don't want to have to come back and clean up any part of this again. We're going to do it in pieces. We're going to do the sock and the hanger and then the cuff. But we want to make sure we don't have to go clean it up again. So once I have it cleaned up and I'm ready to start doing my digitizing, I'm going to put it in memory. So on a Solaris, we're going to save it in memory down here. I'm saving it to my USB. On the other machines, you're going to do the pocket in. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is create our applique. And the applique, we're going to do the lower or the bottom portion. So the sock and the hanger lie underneath the cuff. So what I want to do is get rid of the cuff and keep the hanger and the stocking. Remember, an applique is 3 pieces. Running stitch, which tells us where we place it, tacking it down and cutting away the fabric, and then your finishing stitch. So I want to create an applique for this and this. So basically what I want to do is erase the cuff, but I need to keep this portion of my cuff because I need to have a complete applique shape. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to make my eraser bigger. And I'm going to show you what you want to keep and what you want to get rid of. So we want to get rid of this part, and we want to get rid of this part, and we want to get rid of the center part here. Too much. Okay, but we want to keep this line here and these lines here. So I'm going to zoom in again, and I'm going to move over, and I've got my eraser highlighted. I want to get rid of this part here. Too much. So remember, do small parts so that if you have to go back, you're not redoing. And I want to do this part here. Get one more little pixel out. Okay. I'm going to move up, touch my eraser again. I want to get rid of this part in here, but I want to keep this line. Don't erase this. You need to have a full applique. So I'm going to put that part back, and I want to erase this part of my cuff. Okay. So you want to have what looks like a C, a closed shape, so that we can create an applique. I want to get rid of these pieces. You get rid of it. And again, if you're on the other machines, you have a red box up in this area that you can move around. But I'm going to get rid of all of this. Okay, and now when I zoom back out, I have two applique shapes. Okay, so once you have the stocking and the little tab or hanger ready to create your applique, we're going to have to do 3 different parts to this. So we want to make sure we save it in memory. So we're going to go ahead and put it in memory. I'm going to save it on my stick. You're going to save it probably to your sewing machine. And the first thing we want to do on the applique is assign a running stitch or a placement stitch. So I'm going to go to my line properties. I'm going to choose my running stitch, which is the second icon, and let's choose red. Never choose black, and the reason why is black is the default. So right now we don't want a dot color on, we want to pour color on. So we're going to touch our beaker in the line properties so that we're pouring it on. And when I come over, I want to turn this line red. Okay. If I had chosen black, I may forget that I have this one down here too, so I want to touch it. Now, if you have breaks in your line and you still see black, that means that that part's going to be a satin stitch. You want to make sure that you turn all of this to red, and then it will be assigned the placement stitch or running stitch. So once the whole thing's red, I'm going to touch next, and we did this in the previous stitch out, so you know what we're doing. We have 2 parts that we both want to be the same properties. We're going to touch the link and link them. We're going to just leave it at a 0.08. I know that's a small stitch, but we're just going to leave it. And we're going to take it till we see the word embroidery. So we're either going to touch down here 2 times or 4 times, depending on which machine. And now we have a running stitch. This will be our placement line for our applique. Now we need to create our tack down. So we're going to go to Add. We're going to go back to IQ Designer. We are going to pull it out of memory. So again, either you're going to pull it out of the pocket down here, or on Solaris's you're going to go here, pull it out of your pocket, touch OK, and this time we want to tack it down. So we're going to go back to our line properties. We're going to pick the bean stitch this time. It's 3 passes of thread and it's a pretty secure tack down. And we're going to touch a color other than black. I'm going to choose blue this time. Touch OK. Again, we're going to touch our paint bucket, and I want to turn both of these to blue. And you can see what happens when you choose a light color. And that's why I always say in class, choose a bright color, something you can see. I can see it, you probably can't, but we're going to go ahead and take this to embroidery. So again, we're going to link the 2, and we're going to take it all the way to embroidery. So now we have 2 images. You can't see the red anymore because the blue one's laying right on top of it, and that's good. We want our tack down to be right on top of our placement line. Okay, so now we have our placement stitch and we have our tack down stitch, and so if we were doing our embroidery, we would trim our fabric. And now what we want to do is we want to go back in and we want to create a little cuff or heel and toe on here. So it just is an added little dimension, kind of cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to Add, and we're going to go back to IQ Designer, and we're going to pull from memory that same stocking. So we're going to pull it with just the tab and we're going to touch OK. Okay. And now what we want to do is we just want to add like a little heel and toe here. So I'm going to go to my shapes, and I'm going to go to my little teardrop and touch OK. And when it comes in, it's really huge. So I want to just use a portion of that here and a portion here. So I'm going to size it a little bit. Now, as long as you don't touch off and get rid of that red box, we can play with it. So the red box is still around here. If I touch off, I can't do anything anymore. So hit undo and put the red box back on. Okay, so I'm going to size it and I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. And let's rotate it a little bit. And there's no right or wrong answer. So I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees and 10 more. And see what I'm doing? I'm just pulling this down here. Okay, and I want to make it a little smaller. You don't want any part of it to be going off your screen. So I get it. If something's going off your screen, it's going to tell you that it's out of your embroidery area. So I'm going to hit undo because I need to have the red box back on it. So I'm going to hit size again. So let's size it a little more. And I'm just pulling it down here to see what it looks like. Now, see how this part's going off my screen? I'm going to get rid of that. So I'm going to bring this down because I want about that much of it. Okay, so I'm going to pull this up here, and I'm going to, while the red box is still around it, and you got to keep it on your screen but don't overlap stuff, I want to erase part of this down here. Okay, so I'm just getting rid of part of it. I can make my eraser bigger. Now notice it's not touching anything else. Okay, so I'm just getting a portion of it. Now there's no more red box, but I need to bring this down to here. If I hit undo, it's going to put back what I just undid. So I'm going to go to my select key. And if you're on one of the other machines, your select key might be right here. And you're going to draw a box around this. And when the box is around it, it lets me move it. So I'm going to move it down to about right there. Now, while the red box is still around it, these keys are highlighted. So I am going to duplicate it. And I'm going to bring this one up. And let's rotate that a little bit. And there's all different ways you can do this. This is just one way. But see how I can set that there and make a toe. So I'm kind of liking the way that's looking and that's looking. So now what I want to do is erase all of this. So again, all I want is this portion right here. Okay? So I'm going to go in and I'm going to erase everything else. So I want this part, so I'm going to show you on the sample. I want this part and this part, because all I want to do is a little fill in there. So what I'm going to do is, I can use my select key again, and I could go up here and select all of this and just cut it. Okay? I could come down here and select these parts and cut it. Or I can use my eraser. And a lot of people just feel more safe using the eraser. Again, there's no right or wrong way. There's lots of ways to get to the same outcome. So I'm going to go like this. And what I want to end up with is two closed shapes. Let me zoom in. And come down here. So I'm going to get rid of this portion of the heel. or the toe, I guess I'm on the toe, but I'm going to get rid of all this. And you want to end up with closed shapes. If they're not closed, they won't fill. And you'll know real quick. You know how it is in class when you go, oh no. Okay, so I'm going to go in here and I'm going to keep erasing, just getting rid of little pieces. Okay, and now I'm going to, and again, you might have to use your red box over here. It depends on what machine you're on. And again, as you get, the closer you get to your shape, the slower you want to go, and you also want to make sure that you're lifting your cursor or your mouse so that you don't erase too much. Okay, so when I zoom out, I see I still have some places out here. I got to get rid of all that black. If I don't, it's going to be a satin stitch. No satin stitches. Okay, so when I get finished, I now have these two areas here. Okay, now let's think about this for a minute. I want the fill, okay, but I don't want this outline here necessarily. So what I want to do is I'm going to choose to do a fill, but I'm also going to choose to do the fill and add the border so that it finishes this part. But I don't want two borders. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to my fill properties. So fill properties. I'm going to go to my extra fills. And again, I love using those little circles, but you can choose your own fill. Touch OK and a color. Touch the paint can. We don't want to pour it on, or we don't want to paint it on, we want to pour it in. And touch those. Okay, now do you see what happened there? That's because I have an opening in here. So when that happens, I need to zoom in and I need to find out where there is an opening. So here's the toe part, and I'm looking. So whenever it fills outside, you've got a break. And I've just got to look for it until I find it. And sometimes, so now I'm going to go into 1600%. And if you just have one little place that has a break in it, it is not going to fill. So I'm coming over here. I see a place I could erase if I wanted to. So we're looking, and I'll show you what it looks like close up when you have a break. And this is what happens. I start seeing places I missed and I get crazy and I start cleaning them up. You can see what I'm doing, right? Okay, see right here? There's a break right there. So what I need to do is go in and clean that up. So I'm going to go to my pencil, and I like to choose either line or point to point. Point to point, when you do point to point, if you touch here and touch here, it just puts a line between it. I'm going to undo. So I'm going to come right here and touch a point and touch a point, and now touch a point. Okay, I'm going to go choose this line because the point is so small I can't get that in there. Okay, but I'm going to draw a line from here to here. Okay, now that should be closed. How do I know? Because if I zoom out and I touch my fill bucket and touch here, it now closed it. But do you see how one little pixel caused it to fill the whole screen? Now, I'm going to tell it when I do this fill to create a border around here. So I don't want two borders, so I'm going to go to my line properties and I'm going to say don't sew the outside of this. So I'm going to touch my paint can and now it's not going to sew. It's not going to sew that line and it's not going to sew that line. So now when I digitize, what comes up is my fill. I'm going to link both fills. I want to change my size. I'm going to make it about 50%. And because I'm on a Solaris, on any of the machines you can change the angle. I want to turn my border to on. By turning it to on, it's going to create this line right here. So it'll go all the way around this, but my final stitch will cover it. I want this to sew, so that's why I'm turning my border on. And I could do my random shift or I could do my angles, whatever I want to do. I'm going to turn the thickness to light just because I can. I'm on a Solaris. Okay, and now I'm ready to send it to embroidery. So I'm going to click twice and it's going to put the cuff right on top of, it's filled the cuff part, the heel and the toe. So now I have done my applique. I've put a placement line. I will tack it down. I will trim it. I will add this. Now what I need to do is add my finishing stitch. So I'm going to go back to IQ, add, IQ Designer, pull it from memory. So I'm going to go to my memory and pull out the stocking in the loop. Now this time, all I want is this part of it. Remember, the cuff is going to go here. I don't want that line stitched out so many times. So my finishing stitch, I don't want to finish this area because it's going to get covered. And I don't want to finish this area because it's going to get covered. So I'm going to choose my eraser and I want to go in and I want to get rid of this line here. And I want to get rid of these little parts right here. So I'm going to zoom in and take those out. So get rid of the top. And I want to get rid of this little line, the straight line here and here. So I'm going to touch my eraser. I'm going to get rid of this straight part and this straight part. Okay. So now what I'm doing is I'm just finishing the outer edges because this part and this part is going to be covered with the cuff and I don't want to build up that embroidery. So I'm going to assign a chain stitch. It's a line. I'm going to line properties. I'm going to grab my chain stitch. I'm going to choose red. I'm going to touch OK. Don't want my pencil. I'm going to touch my paint can and I'm going to touch all 3 lines. Everything should turn to red. Okay, if it doesn't, make sure it all turns red. I touch next. On a chain stitch, this is the size of it. I'm going to leave the size as it is. This is how many repeats. So in other words, it's going to go over it 5 times. I'm good with that. It's an outline. Now I'm going to take it to embroidery. Set, OK. So now I have my chain stitch on the outside. So now the only thing I need to do is add my cuff. And when I add my cuff, it's also going to be an embroidery. So I need 3 pieces. So I'm going to go to add. I'm going to go back to IQ Designer. I'm going to pull my stocking out of memory, and I want this stocking with the cuff, touch OK, and this time I'm going to erase everything but the cuff. So again, I could go to my select, and I could put a box around this lower portion and cut it, or I can just use my erase key. So I'm going to go into my erase key. I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to take away everything that is not the cuff. And as I get up here closer, I slow down and I lift my mouse more frequently so I don't accidentally erase. Oops. And here I want to get rid of the whole hanger. So I want to get rid of all this. And as I get closer, I start releasing. Again, you don't want to see if I do this and I don't get rid of my eraser and then I accidentally nick this, it brings everything back. So we just want to make sure we keep lifting. And I took away one little pixel there, so I got to do that over. Zoom in more. Okay. Okay, and when I get my cuff cleaned up, one more pixel. Too many. And I hope you guys really appreciate digitizers now because you see what they do when they create all these wonderful patterns for us. Okay, once I've got the cuff cleaned up, I'm going to save it in memory because I need to get it 3 times. Okay, so the first thing's going to be my placement stitch. I'm going to go to Line Properties, choose the color. I'm going to choose the color I can see. Let's go with purple. Touch OK. I did not touch the running stitch. So running stitch, color, OK. Touch my beaker, touch it, and now I'm going to take it to embroidery. So I'm going to touch 2 times down here or 4 times if you're on the other machine. And there it is. I put my cuff there. I'm good. I'm going to go to Add, go back to IQ Designer, pull that cuff out of memory. And this time I want to assign a heavy tack down stitch or a bean stitch. So I'm going to go to Line Properties, choose the bean stitch, choose a tuck color, touch OK, paint can, touch my cuff. I'm OK with the small stitch, and I'm going to send this all the way to embroidery. So now I've got my tack down. Final thing is my finishing stitch. I'm going to go to Add one more time. I'm going to go to IQ Designer. I'm going to pull the cuff out of memory. And this time I'm going to add a satin stitch. So the satin stitch is already chosen, but I'm going to pick a color because I always want to be sure I can see it. Touch my paint can, touch my satin stitch. Now this time on a satin stitch, this is the width of your satin stitch, and 0.08 is kind of small. So I like to make that a little wider. I like to go to at least a 0.12 or 0.14. And your density, I always like a nice heavy density. So I'm going to make that 110 and touch OK. And now when I take that to embroidery, it is going to line up right on top of my cuff. And I am happy. Okay, now the other thing, we can go ahead and save this in memory. So let's touch embroidery and put it in memory just so we don't lose it. Okay, now if you want to add a name, now's the time to add the name. So we're going to go to Add, and we're going to go to our fonts. These are our smaller fonts, and you can choose any of these fonts that you want. So let's say I want to choose this font. Okay, when you bring the first letter in, so let's say that I want to write love. When I choose my L, everything comes in at large, and large letters are about 1 inch. They're pretty big, so I would suggest for this that you go with the medium. And the rest of my letters, here's my lowercase letters. I'm just going to write the word love. Okay, and when I set that, this is highlighted, so that's the only thing that I'm playing with. So the beauty of these machines is now if I go to Edit and I touch my text, I can size it. So here's my size. I can make it large if I want to. So there's, because it's going to go to small first, then large. And large might work better on this font. I can also go to spacing or array. So array does this to your letters. Makes them like this or this. I'm going to leave mine on a straight line. Touch OK. Okay, and when I touch the word set, if I go to edit, that's still highlighted. In edit, I can touch rotate, and I can rotate this because I want it to look like it fits on there. I can rotate a degree at a time, 10 degrees at a time. I can move them. I can move it, and I'm just trying to get this box kind of centered in there. When I'm happy, I'm going to touch OK, and we are ready. I'm going to take it to embroidery and save it one more time, and then we are going to talk. When I put this in my hoop, my fabric is going to be hooped this way, okay? Because this block finishes at 13.5 by 10.5. So this is the 10.5 and this is the 13.5. Now, if you're on not a Solaris, so if you're on any of the other machines, we're all going to rotate it, but you're going to have to quilt it after the fact. But if you're on a Solaris, we can actually create a block just like we did before. No matter which machine you're on, what we want to do is rotate this. So again, if you see the word memory here, you're going to have to hit return because we're looking for our grouping feature. When I touch embroidery, my grouping feature is gone. So if I hit return and I group, so I'm going to group them all together. Now that everything's grouped and I rotate, okay, I can't rotate, it's grayed out. So what I have to do is, this was your grouping, and once I grouped it, I have to retouch this to activate it, and when I do, my rotate is now highlighted. Okay, so let me show you that again. When I hit return, everything is separate. I want to group it, so I'm going to touch my grouping, and I'm going to touch this. Now everything is grouped. When I touch OK, if your rotate is not highlighted, this ungroups, this groups. So when it's grouped, I can touch my rotate, and now I'm rotating everything 90 degrees. And that's what I want to do. And I'm going to touch OK. Now, if you want to add background here, so again, if we were done, we're just going to save it. So if you're on a Destiny, an Altair, or a Meridian, you're just going to save it in memory, and you're going to stitch it out. And we're going to add your stippling after the fact. But I'm on a Solaris, and I know that this block finishes at 13.5 by 10.5, and I know that I can do my embroidery in here right now. So if you see the word embroidery, we've gone too far. So I got to hit the word return. You don't want to see embroidery. When I hit return, okay, I want to take this to IQ Designer and add the stippling, but just make it the size of the block that I need. So again, we're going to touch the combine key. We're going to combine everything. We're going to touch OK. Now, to take this to IQ, you need to go to your edit feature. And instead of stippling or doing one of the designs right here, which is going to fill the entire screen, we're going to take it to IQ Designer. So I'm going to touch this. And the machine tells us that we're not going to cancel it or nothing happens. So our only choice is memory. And again, when you touch memory, it says you're going to recall it from IQ Designer. So I'm going to touch OK. Now I'm going to touch Add. I'm going to go back to IQ Designer, and I'm going to pull that out. They said from shapes, so here it is in shapes. I'm pulling it out of the flower, and there's my design, which I'm going to touch OK. Here is the outside of my design. Now I want to put that in a box that is 13.5 by 10.5. So I'm going to add a shape, which is a square. OK. All right, and I'm going to make this square, comes in with a red box around it. I want to make it 13.5 inches tall. So I'm going to press and hold till it's 13.5 tall. And again, you can only do this on the Solaris. You don't have a large enough frame if you're on the Destiny, the Altair, or the Meridian. Okay, so I've got it 13.5 tall. I'm going to make it 10.5 wide. And again, you can see that my width is the bottom number and my height or the tall is 13.5. Okay, now when I do this, I don't want to sew this line. So when I touch off of here, there's a box. I'm going to go to Line Properties, touch No Sew, touch OK, touch my beaker, and I don't want to sew this line. This line won't sew. If you try to tell it not to sew, it's already going to say it doesn't sew. And now we want to fill the outside. So I'm going to go to my Fill Properties. I'm going to choose a fill, and I'm going to choose Stipple because we haven't used it yet, and a color, and OK. Again, I don't want to paint it on, I want to pour it on, and I'm going to touch between here. And now it's going to stipple as I do my embroidery. I'm going to touch Next. This is the length of my stitch. 0.08 is kind of small. I'm going to leave it like that. This is really tiny stippling, so I'm going to make this a 0.3 or somewhere close. And it doesn't have to be exact. So 3.0, I'm going to hit OK. And the beauty of the Solaris, it shows you right on the screen. And now I'm going to take this to embroidery. So when I take it over, it does the stippling right outside of this. And I love this because this is how Anita Good Design does their designs, where they do the embroidery. When they're doing the embroidery, they do the quilting portion, and then when they sew the blocks together, they simply stitch in the ditch. So if I'm finished, I touch embroidery, I would hoop my fabric. Now remember, this block is going to finish at 13.5 by 10.5. You're going to measure it when you cut it. It's just slightly smaller than that, but you won't be cutting any of your threads. And again, if you want to see how it's going to stitch out, if you hit return and you hit your hoop and you touch the play button and touch play, it's going to show you exactly how this is going to stitch out. So it did it. Now it's doing the fills. It's doing the finishing stitch. It's going to do the placement line right now. Finishing stitch for that. Add your lettering and add your stippling. And this block will be complete. The only thing that I do want to remind you is that if you're using cuddle, flannel, felt, anything that has any nap to it, when you do this portion, you want to put a topper on it so that the threads don't sink down into it. But anyways, this is this block, and it's just kind of an easy applique with a cute little decorative touch.